And also start the live stream, and then you're ready to go.
Okay, I make that 7 o'clock. Got a bit of an echo here, I think, at the moment. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, members of the Planning Committee and those in the public gallery. And I don't think we've got a member of the press here tonight. And those watching online, welcome to the Planning Committee meeting, Tuesday, the 6th of December, 2022. Okay, first item of the agenda are apologies. I believe we've got a full house tonight. And no apologies, that's excellent. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. To receive declarations of interest from members on items included on the agenda. Do you have any declarations to make to that effect this evening? I'll take that by silence that's sent. Thank you. This takes us to the first substantive item on the agenda tonight. That is item 4, application for major development land adjacent to Hune Avenue and Milehouse Lane, Cross Heath. Oh, yes, good. I've just pointed out that I haven't moved the minutes, so that's remiss of me. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Do we believe that to be a true and accurate record of proceedings last time we met? Do we have a proposer? Councillor Jones, do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Williams. That is moved. Back on to item 4. Myself this time, application for major development land adjacent to Hune Avenue and Milehouse Lane, Cross Heath. I believe you're introducing this one, Nick. Scott, over to you, Scott.
This is an outline application with all matters reserved, except for access. For the construction of up to 100 dwellings with associated infrastructure, children's play area, landscaping and open space. The site lies within the urban area of Newcastle and it's designated as open space and as part of the protective green heritage network as indicated in the local development framework proposals map. The application site comprises of a greenfield land, as I said, designated open space. The council is currently able to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing sites. They currently have a supply of 7.3 years to the 31st of March 2021. However, the NPPF seeks to significantly boost the supply of homes and there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Although this site's not previously developed land, the site is considered to represent a highly sustainable location for new housing due to its good transport links and links to education facilities, employment opportunities, services and amenities. As a result of the development proposed, there would be the loss of 2.4 hectares of public open space, with the resulting of 0.94 hectares remaining. The remaining 0.94 hectares would consist of the landscape link, which is this area here. And the leap play area here. And the the green amenity space around the Suds Pond and here. The council's current open space strategy recommends per 1,000 population of 0.9 hectares. Currently, and this is in the officer's report, the council have a surplus of amenity green space. There is currently 128 hectares of amenity green space on 112 sites. This equates to 1.03 hectares of amenity green space per 1,000 population. The proposal would reduce the amount of green space by 3 hectares to 125 hectares, divided by a population of 124,000, still gives you 1 hectare per 1,000 population, which exceeds the minimum standards in the council's open space strategy. In addition to meeting the council's requirements in the open space strategy, there are 9 sites identified within the site of Hoon Avenue. The closest green space measuring 2 hectares or more is located 400 meters from the site at Woolstanton Marsh. This is identified as a park or garden and meets the access standards. The land south of Hoon Avenue is adjacent to a piece of amenity green space to the site, which is less than 220 meters away. It's on that basis that it's considered that there is still sufficient open space to meet the demands of the population. In terms of affordable housing, with there being up to 100 dwellings proposed, there would be a maximum of 25 dwellings or 25% of the dwellings constructed, which would meet the council's requirements. In terms of highway safety, there are 2 vehicle accesses proposed. One would serve the southern part of the site, which would be directly off Hoon Avenue and Hempstall Lane, and to the south, just before Sparch Hollow roundabout. These would be new priority junctions. The local highways authority don't raise any objections on highways ground, and there is minimum mitigation works required to the Miles House Lane, Hassan Parade, Hoon Avenue roundabout to formalise entry and make it more efficient. Trees and hedgerows. As a result of the access, there are the loss of trees, but it is considered that the improvement and landscaping would provide better quality trees and species, and therefore on that matter the proposal is supported by officers. The site lies within flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk of flooding, and the surface water would be held on site through attenuation sites or oversized pipes. This would then be discharged into Lyme Brook via a new outfall, and it would be restricted to less than 5 litres per hectare. It would actually be 4.7 litres per hectare. There have been no objections raised by the Environment Agency or the lead local flood authority or Severn Trent Water, and they're all satisfied that the sustainable drainage proposed is feasible and can be achieved. In terms of ecology and biodiversity, the ecology surveys recommend mitigation and best practice, and there is considered to be an overall improvement and enhancement. Moving next to residential amenity, the air quality report concludes that the development would not have a significant impact on local air quality, and this is supported by environmental health. The noise assessment acknowledges that the dominant source of noise would be from road traffic from the surrounding network, including Hoon Avenue, but there is a mitigation strategy proposed to achieve indoor ambient noise levels for dwellings that are acceptable, and also suitable standards for external amenity space. It's acknowledged that there is a Roman road between Little Chester and Chesterton that runs through the northern part of the site, and it's considered that an archaeology method statement and recording is considered acceptable. Finally, moving on to the planning obligations, the applicant has confirmed their willingness to agree to the provision of 25% of affordable housing on site. The landscape development section has requested a contribution of 20,000 towards the improvements to the existing multi-use games area at the Croft Road play area. known as Icky Picky. And it's also agreed that the public open space would be appropriately managed, and there would be an agreement with that, together with a contribution of £10,000 to the monitoring of a travel plan for a period of 5 years. And on that basis, officers' recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions listed in the report and subject to a Section 106 agreement.
Thank you, Scott, for that comprehensive introduction. I believe we've got a speaker on this, Mr. Williams, for the application. Is he here tonight, or is he online? He's online. Hello, Mr. Williams. Can you hear me? Mr. Williams, are you there online?
He has been added to the meeting.
Hello,
Can you hear me, Mr. Williams?
I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can indeed.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry about that.
Before I start, I'll just remind you, you've got 3 minutes to speak. At 2 minutes, the clerk on my right here, although you probably can't see him, will remind you that you've got a minute left. So if you'd like to commence in your time, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to address you in respect of this outline planning application, which your officers are recommending for approval. I'm speaking on behalf of the landowner and applicant, Staffordshire County Council. You have before you a comprehensive report from your officers, and you've received a comprehensive presentation already this evening, so I don't intend to repeat the contents of that, but did just want to highlight some of the key points. As you've heard, the application is for up to 100 new homes, including 25% affordable, along with associated infrastructure, including public open space and a children's play area. The application is made in outline with all matters reserved except access, which has been the subject of detailed consideration and engagement with the local highway authority. The site currently comprises an underutilised area of open grassland located within the urban area. The application followed, the submission of the application followed pre-application engagement with both officers and with members via the Strategic Planning Consultative Group and with the local community. The latter was somewhat more limited than we would normally have liked to achieve, but that was at the time of the COVID restrictions. So we sought to do what we could, which was comprise the delivery of a 4-page leaflet to approximately 650 homes in the immediate local area. As requested in the pre-application advice that we received from officers and members, the application was accompanied by a detailed open space assessment to consider the availability of alternative open space provision in the local area. An assessment of existing open spaces within 1.5 kilometres of the application site, equating to approximately a 15-minute walk, was undertaken to consider the quality and quantity of alternative open space provision in the area. The assessment identified 9 other sites within a 1.5 kilometre radius of the site, totaling 46.3 hectares. The report concludes that there is sufficient quantity and quality of existing alternative open space provision within that 1.5 kilometre radius to ensure the proposed development would not detrimentally impact on accessibility to open space for existing and future residents. Furthermore, the development itself would re-provide nearly a hectare of public open space along with the children's play area mentioned. Other concerns referenced traffic impacts, so we've been careful to engage fully on those, including the assessment, the submission of a detailed transport assessment, capacity assessments of various junctions in and around the site, and road safety audits for the new junctions accessing the site, along with a travel plan to promote the use of sustainable modes of travel. We've also, as mentioned, satisfied the Environment Agency, the lead local flood authority, and Severn Trent Water in respect of the drainage strategy to ensure that it wouldn't be at risk of flooding nor exacerbate flood risk elsewhere. As concluded in your officer's report, there are no technical objections, and the site is considered to represent a highly sustainable location for new housing due to its good transport links to education facilities, employment opportunities, services, and amenities. Thank you.
Mr. Williams. Right, at this point, I'll open it up to members. Members. I see Councillor Hutchison and Councillor William. Councillor Gordon.
Right, thank you, Chair. This land adjacent to Hoon Avenue and Milehouse Lane is in the Crossheath ward, but the land borders the Maybank ward, and myself and the other Maybank councillors have had telephone calls and emails from many residents about this application for the outline planning permission. With your permission, I'd just like to raise 3 issues. On page 11 of the report, we read, is designated as open space and part of the protected green heritage network as indicated on the local development frameworks proposal map. Please will the officer explain the total area on the map that is protected and any of the area that's currently not protected. My second concern is regarding the drainage on the site. I think we need a lot more detail regarding the proposals for the drainage. As someone who watches 2 dogs on the site, no matter what the time of year, you need Wellington boots due to the land being severely waterlogged. It's especially bad the closer you walk to the Lyme Brook, when there is excess foul and surface water. So do we have any more details on the drainage of the land, please? And then finally, the proposal talks about up to 100 houses. Do we have any more details on this? Would it be flats? Would it be 2-bedroomed, 3, 4, 5-bedroomed? Is there any more information? Because obviously the number and the size of houses is going to have an impact on the number of cars that's going to be in the area. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Councillor. Want to respond, Scott?
In terms of the heritage network and open space, the entire site is allocated for open space, which there is policy there to protect. The policy seeks to provide a minimum, and that minimum standard is then based in the public open space strategy, which is a minimum of 0.9 hectares per 1,000 population. So currently there is an excess of public open space within the area based on current standards from 2016, which is the most up-to-date standard the council has.
So there's no protective area within that then that's 100% protected?
Yeah, it's all protected.
It's all protected, yeah.
It's all allocated and protected as open
Does that
space.
answer your question, Councillor?
But obviously there's a minimum standard in terms of the open space strategy to provide, which is 0.9 hectares per 1,000 population. So there currently is an excess. In terms of drainage, the Environment Agency, Severn Trent Water and the lead local flood authority are satisfied with the strategy that has been put forward and are comfortable that that can be achieved. The details would be subject of a further submission which would be secured by a condition. Because obviously the very detailed drainage then would be dictated to by the design and layout of the houses. In terms of the detailed layout and the type of houses proposed, that would be subject to any reserved matters should planning permission be granted. The outline would set the parameters of up to 100 and no more. And then that would be, the details would then be laid out in a subsequent reserved matters application.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This land on Hoon Avenue, I'll name it Balls Field, as I know it of. I've known it many, many years. It's old ancient farmland within the urban area, well used by residents. It is cut once a year by the county council, and it's unique in that sense, where the grass grows quite long and it's an haven for wildlife. people have walked, made paths around and across, and you can see these from Google Earth, bird's eye view on Google Earth. You can see the paths in certain areas they haven't walked. You can see the cost defined quite easily. Mr. Chairman, I want to go for refusal on this particular item, on the point this land was designated as open access for use by the residents in the last local plan. The owners, Staffs County Council, have asked consultants, YWG, as the officer has actually mentioned, he hadn't mentioned their name, but to look at open access land within the area. And how they've done this, Mr. Chairman, is they've drawn a circle around Huon Avenue within, in their estimation, 15 minutes walk. If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'll go through these pieces of land that's mentioned. Just bear with me a minute, Mr. Chairman. I've got it down here. 834, strip of land. If you're going north to the right of the 834, just a strip of land like a wide footpath. That includes Sheldon Grove, which is across the other side of 834. And at my way of walking, 15 minutes, well in excess of 15 minutes. Golden Avenue playing fields, I should say just in, but it's a playing field. It hasn't got the character of Ballsfield. Woolstanton Marsh, which is down, you know, it's cut to a really good degree. And again, it's different than the piece of land that I'm talking about on Huon Avenue. Land to the south of Huon Avenue, I expect this is the piece of land that runs from the site, run down to St. Martin's Road. And we've also got Dashfield's Brook, I'm missing out Dicky Picky, which is down to the south of St. Martin's Road. But then you go on to mention Ashfield's Brook Douglas Road, which is a piece of land, as people know, between Douglas Road and Morrison's. That's down across from the site across the 834, down a bank onto this particular site. Again, well cut, manicured, very nice spot. Not really the piece of land that we talk, like this piece of land we're talking about in Huon Avenue. Crossroad Plain area, which is Icky Picky, was mentioned. We mentioned Brampton Park, and they mentioned Lower Lyme Brook, and that's the whammy. And that's across from this site, across the 884, down the bank, up the bank, over into the whammy. And that's well in excess of 50 minutes walk. Lyme Brook, it's a piece of land at Western Close, which is across from the whammy. Again, in my view, over 15 miles, 50 minutes walk. And I worked that out as 3,985 hectares taken from that sum that they've said, or the consultants have said, is in within 15 minutes walk of Ballsfield. If this land is developed, Mr. Chairman, or is given permission, nothing's so certain that the County Council will sell it off to a developer who will then come back to us, sure as eggs, to change and to get their maximum profit out of that. I have no problem with that, but I've got a problem actually building on the developing this land. The other point, Mr. Chairman, I can't accept putting a play area on this site. It would tease children from the Hollywood Avenue estate to play on it. Children would have to cross Milehouse Lane, a busy road, and a blind bend. There isn't a play area on the Hollinshead Avenue. It used to be, but it was closed down, and all the play equipment stripped from it. So there isn't a play area in that particular area, so you can understand where the children would come across to this site. Building homes on the land would worsen the flooding already happens in St. Martin's Road, 500 yards to the south of this site. The culvert Limebrook runs under, just can't cope, especially in heavy rain that we now suffer as climate change continues. And it floods quite regularly, Mr. Chairman, as it does. Building on this land again, the rain would not soak away, would it run into the Limebrook and worsen the flooding in the area. Traffic from the proposed site would worsen already a problem that exists on roads around, making life worse for residents living nearby. Staff County Council responsible for education as the developer of this land has not asked for any 106 funds for Hempstalls Primary School that's in the catchment area for this development. I wonder why. I'll leave the committee members to draw their own conclusions. One last thing, Mr. Chairman, I hope to come back later. I've already made the point that if the county council develop this land, they will sell it off for the highest price. That's the reason for the development, and that developer would come back and make the problem worse for the residents in that area. So I won't say any more for now, Mr. Chairman, but I would like to refuse on the lands that is down as open space in the last local plan. And the consultants, which they've done, I think they're renting up is not correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I do recognise that this is a very comprehensive report, and I think we've had a very sort of detailed explanation this evening. But I do have some questions, and in fact, some concerns. And the one thing that I've struggled really to understand is how a site can be designated as green open space and be part of a protected green heritage network and still be the subject of a planning application for development. And, you know, please forgive my bluntness, Mr. Chairman, but it almost seems to be a pointless title. If it doesn't conserve or protect a piece of green space, what is the point of the title? I can't pretend that I know the site as well as Councillor Williams or Councillor Hutchinson, but I do know it a little bit. It isn't that far from the Woolstanton boundary. And I'd argue that it is one of the few remaining pieces of green space open to residents in Crossheath and Hempstalls. It is widely used and it's widely appreciated. The report argues that alternative green space is available on Woolstanton Marsh and on the Brampton. But I think for residents living in Hempstalls, they would view it as their green space and I think be very loyal to it in a way that they don't feel at all towards the Marsh or the Brampton. I also think and would question whether the report underplays the habitats provided on the site for wildlife. You know, I've had a number of residents get in touch with me since the application was published to sort of point out that this site is a home for bats, hedgehogs, swallows, jays, ravens, buzzards, herons, and common lizards. And I think one of the concerns that I have is that if the application goes ahead, we could lose an awful lot of habitat that wouldn't be replaced. Now, I note that the report refers to an extended phase survey that was completed in June 2016, and subsequent reviews that were took place in October 2018 and November 2020. But I just wonder about really the consequence of the reviews, and is it not a case that the last full survey of the site was conducted in June 2016 and a good deal may have changed during the last 6 years? Now, the two previous speakers have emphasised concerns over flooding, and it's very clear that Hempstalls and Sparch Hollow, there is a problem, and that the existing drainage simply doesn't seem to be able to deal with current levels of rainfall. And I do fear that the construction of 100 dwellings will add to drainage problems. And Councillor Hutchinson has pointed out that really, when you visit the site, you often see the ground is waterlogged. And once again, you think, well, is this a suitable space really for development? I have concerns over highway and road safety. There will be a new access onto Milehouse Lane, which is already a busy stretch of road. And I'd argue that in certain times of the day with the high school, it is very busy indeed. And I would ask if the transport assessment and the predicted transport flows referred to in the report take sufficient account of how busy Milehouse Lane is during peak times. And there's a concern, I think, that building 100 dwellings will add to traffic congestion. And by feeding more traffic into Milehouse Lane, will add to the traffic hazards along this stretch of road. I'm not clear from the report who will be responsible for maintaining the maintenance of the green space that is left, should the site be developed, and who will look after things, very basic things like fencing and grass cutting. The final point I wanted to make, Mr. Chairman, really relates to the Roman remains. This is a site, I think, of historic interest. The report confirms that a Roman road runs through the northern part of the site. And in her full report, which is available through the sort of attached documentation, the county archaeologist recognises that the site is of sufficient interest to merit further investigation. But the report sort of indicates that because there's been little previous work done there, we don't really know the site's value and significance. And one of the concerns that I've got is whether the control measures suggested in the report will actually give sufficient time and allow a full and proper survey to be conducted, which will ensure that the site's historical significance is understood and recorded. So I do think, Mr. Chairman, that when it comes to this particular site, the authority seems to want it both ways. We've given it this title, which seems to suggest it's part of a green network. But on the other hand, well, if an application comes forward for development, then, you know, that may well proceed. I do think it's time to sort of end the speculation over the site's future. And what I hope is that the authority would work with the county council to try and ensure that this site is given real protected status and that it, you know, it continues to be a valuable green space that is conserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. Would our officers like to come back on this, please?
Right. In terms of the open space, obviously the local development framework seeks to protect and allocate areas of open space to ensure that the minimum standards that are outlined in the open space strategy are satisfied. So in terms of this site, there is an adequate supply of quality and quantity within the area to meet the needs of the population based on the minimum requirements. If open space wasn't allocated within a development plan, then obviously they would be free to develop. It's there to put a restriction and a constraint in to ensure that minimum standards are satisfied and that you don't go below the 0.9 hectares per 1,000 population. In terms of drainage, it's acknowledged in the report that there are infiltration problems given the ground conditions with the site, and that surface water is flowing off the site onto the highway. And we've had photographs submitted from residents recently which show the current rainfall and the flooding. The Environment Agency, the LFFA and Severn Trent Water acknowledged that the drainage system proposed, or the strategy proposed, will address the current issues and deal with the and accommodate the surface water that would be generated from the site that could be stored on site and discharged at a greenfield rate of less than 5 litres per second into Lyme Brook. In terms of archaeology, the condition would be worded in such a way that yes, the time would be given for a full investigation to be carried out to ensure that whatever is found is appropriately recorded. If for any instance that condition isn't complied with, the council then has powers to take enforcement action for breach of condition. So there are measures in place to ensure that investigation is fully undertaken, that there is a full written report carried out, how that would be carried out, and how it would be recorded. In terms of the point that was raised on ecology, there was a comprehensive survey carried out in 2016, and then there has been comprehensive reviews on that full study, bringing it up to date with full protected species studies as well, because the issue of water voles was raised with the potential that the brook was a habitat for them, which was addressed. In terms of highways, the transport assessment has been assessed by the Highway Authority. It's been fully reviewed, and they've arrived at the conclusion that the surrounding roads have the capacity to take the traffic for 100 houses, and that they will operate subject to the minor tweak to the roundabout at Milehouse Lane, Hoon Avenue. And that there is their comprehensive travel plan in place as well, to make sure residents are aware of the public transport in the area, which will be monitored as well by the local highway authority for a period of 5 years. I think that covers the points. If I've missed anything, my apologies. Thank you.
Councillor Gorton, does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, I'll take Councillor Holland and then followed by Councillor Jones and then Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to the comments from member representing Cross Heath, in whose ward this application is. I am familiar with the site, but perhaps less familiar with it than the councillors have already spoken. I am willing to entertain a motion to refuse this application, but we'd need to do so with some reasons, and none of the speakers who've spoken so far have given either a proposal to refuse this development or a reason. We've undergone a couple of items of note, haven't we? So there's flooding, and I know that councillors have mentioned their concerns about flooding at this location, and I note that those are concerns, and they're met with an officer's report that refers to detailed scientific work that's been undergone that says that it can be mitigated. Slightly concerned that part of the mitigation seems to be collecting it all in a very large pool at one end of the site. I'd be concerned about the safety of that and its effectiveness. Can our officer assure us that when they've been looking into this matter, they're not just seeking to keep the problem as bad as it is now, because we accept that part of the public space there and even the highway is flooded occasionally in that location? And are we requiring, as part of this outline application, are we saying, okay, well, it's pretty bad, but so long as we don't make it any worse on the bits that remain public, it's okay? Or are we saying that any development on this site has to come with really robust measures that will fix that problem, both to protect the amenity of the people who will be living in those proposed dwellings? They don't want their gardens or their houses to be underwater, but also for the users of the public space that remains, because the other matter that we've considered in some detail, and Councillor Gorton referred to it, is the Green Heritage Network. I'm not sure that we've had a proper exploration of that, but the report that's in front of us does detail that. We are talking specifically about local plan policy N16, preserved or saved or otherwise. We often hear that our local plan is completely out of date and can't be relied upon and such things, but I'm willing to read into that. And what our officer's report tells us tonight is that the policy is to protect the network. And we did hear one figure from our officer who introduced the report. I take a little bit of issue with an average across the whole of the borough, because that's kind of meaningless. To say that we're going to have 0.9 hectares per head of per 100 head of population, or however many it turns out to be, is far too broad. I understand that's what the policy might say, but it's not helpful to us or to those residents of Hempstalls or Milehouse to say that, oh, well, there's plenty of green space in Kidsgrove or in the Westlands, and on average, you're well served. That is not a strong argument. But what is a strong argument is to say, well, Stanton Marsh is only around the corner. And there are some very high quality open public spaces close by to this application. And those, in my view, would meet the identified needs of residents, both who live there now and also the residents putatively of the proposed dwellings. And I would like to see very much that if we do approve this, we are seeking to maximize what our report refers to as mitigation and or compensation measures, not just in terms of green spaces, but particularly in terms of green spaces, because I would rather have high quality open green spaces that are maintained and looked after and burnished and are a joy for all of our residents than a low quality offer. And I think you can correct me if I'm misunderstood or misheard him. Councillor Williams did mention that this is a site which is cut perhaps once a year by the county council at the present time. That doesn't seem to me to be a very high quality open space, whereas I know for certain that the marsh is. And so I would be minded, I think, at this stage to permit the development, but with reassurance that we're maximising what we get out of it. And I'm mindful also of what the member for Crossheath said about how it is very likely the applicant will not be the applicant when we get a full planning application for the reserved matters. It is likely that with outline consent secured, there will be a greedy capitalist involved, and we will need to try much harder at that stage to secure things if we don't now secure them at this open planning stage. So those are my thoughts at the moment. One last thing, because I'm looking at the map, and for people who are paying attention to us online, you won't have been able to see our pretty faces for much of this because we've had the map up on what I think is the officer's screen that's being shared. But there does seem in the outline to be a few of these dwellings look like houses. I don't know if it's very clear to people. I've been zooming in on my tablet. Some of them look like houses. A lot of the proposed units do look like blocks of flats. And it does seem to me at the very bottom of our screen, that's not south on the map, but it's the very bottom of our screen, there seems to be a block of 6 flats within spitting distance of some gardens of the existing dwellings. And I have a feeling that, if we're looking at building a 2-story block of 6 flats right up against somebody's back garden, albeit facing perpendicular to the garden, that would be something at a future stage that we'll be peering at and thinking, well, that's not quite perhaps how we would want it. And when I think this is an application for up to 100 units, an awful lot of those units seem to be flats rather than individuals or semi-detached dwellings. I'll leave it there. I've said enough. Thank you.
Councillor Holland, I think probably at this stage, those the diagrams there are indicative of houses that could be on there and will be obviously subject to a reserve matters application should it be approved at a future stage, which would be another argument. I'm going to take Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think when I look at this site, I find it easy to consider it to be a site that we really do need a good reason to permit development on this site. It's a site that's protected as part of the open space strategy, and I very much, Councillor Holland, pit me to it. I think the numbers that are quoted are exceptionally meaningless when you consider that to access some of those green spaces, it would take a resident to get in their car, drive up to Kidsgrove, drive over to Loggerheads, and residents in that area just aren't going to do that. I'm less concerned about the quality of the green open space available to residents. I think for a number of residents, I was actually, I don't know this site incredibly well, so I went up on the weekend to familiarise myself. And what I saw was a site that is well used by a number of dog walkers who, quite frankly, aren't that bothered about the length of grass. They want somewhere to be able to walk their dog with big amounts of green space for the dogs to be able to exercise. I note that under this plan, a resident coming from the existing developments on Hoon Avenue would have to come along and then walk down that green strip to access the wide green space at the northeast of the site. That green strip that looks not that much wider than a road's width, which is quite a narrow space for dog walkers. They'd have to do that, walk through another estate, and then get to that little patch at the northeast of the site, which I think is a significant reduction in the availability of green space that those residents can be active with. I think the second part of this that makes me concerned is the historic value of the site with the archaeologist's report. And it's noted in the archaeologist's report that no excavations have taken part on this site. I think that's quite a shame. I think it's a fantastic site for excavations to occur, and it's a shame that hasn't happened so far. And I feel quite personally that if we are to approve development on that site, the reasons for approving the development on that site, given the numbers quoted at the start that we meet our housing target, so there's no initial requirement for us to do it on that basis, it feels like we are really taking away the only usable green site in the area. So I would like to second Councillor Williams's refusal for this. I think Councillor Williams made a very clear point in his refusal that the access to other green spaces and the report that it says it's a 15-minute walk away, if the whammy is included on that, it's not a 15-minute walk away from that site. It also doesn't account for the fact that any walk for green spaces on the other side of the A34 would require walking to find a point at which you can cross a very busy road, crossing the very busy road, which obviously has a time factor associated with that, before progressing on the other side of the road to the site and returning. And as somebody who's had dogs myself, I don't think I'd be doing that. I don't think I'd be walking with my kids from that location all the way down to the whammy in order to just have a walkabout in some green space. I wouldn't. I think it's, I think there's risk that we deprive residents in that area of what is the only usable green space. Now, I have heard mention of Woolstanton Marsh, and I had to have a look on maps to really try and gauge the distance. And I think it is closer than the whammy. I think there's a lot of things closer than the whammy to that site. And it doesn't involve transferring across the A34, I acknowledge that. But if you're to walk to that location, then you'll find that actually it's probably not as quick a walk as the indication of as the crow flies when we say the distance between the two. It is quite a convoluted route, and I was trying to figure out how I would do it. And actually I ended up sort of following the route that I would go if I was driving from that location, which is quite a long route. So in seconding Councillor Williams' call for refusal, I would say that I would second it on the basis that I do not feel that we have heard suitable reason to take that site out of the open space strategy and to enable it for development. The closest that I've heard, and for note, is about issues with water on the land, which I assume is retained water on the land. And personally, I don't think that building up to 100 houses on a piece of land is the way to deal with it. If we're being told that the drainage problems will be resolved but only if we allow 100 houses to be built on there. I think that's not a satisfactory answer. I think if there is an issue with flooding on the site that's causing issues onto the highway, then like any other site within the borough, it's the landowner's responsibility to rectify that solution. So I'm afraid I will be seconding Councillor Williams' call for refusal on the grounds that it isn't a suitable site for development to be taken out of the open space strategy.
So Jones, I'd love for you to drive to Loggerheads and point out the public open spaces, because I don't believe they exist, but some areas are more fortunate. Loggerheads isn't one of them for public open space, despite the fact it's surrounded by fields. They're not open to the public. So in many respects, sometimes Newcastle urban area does look far better in terms of open space. I was going to take Councillor Fear, but I'll take Councillor Moffat, and I think I'll end with Councillor Fear, if that's okay, Councillor Fear. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks, Chair. So the only thing I have to add to other councillors' comments is to, first of all, acknowledge and thank the 63 residents who sent letters in of concern about this development. I think the points raised in the letters are very pertinent, many of which have been touched on by councillors who've commented before. There are a couple that I'm wondering whether or not you can just give us a little bit more information on. One is that it has only been 4 to 5 years since a previous appeal was rejected. So I think that's a pertinent comment in a letter, and it would be interesting for us to know why it was rejected. The other, perhaps somebody here can give me a little bit of insight into who Mr. Ash was, and should we really be ignoring his desire to leave the land for recreational use? So those two things. Thank you.
In on that one, Ollie, Councillor Fear, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If we could go back to the drawing for a moment, I take your point precisely that this is an indicative plan, so we shouldn't be excited about where the pictures of the houses are. Although, like Councillor Holland, I'm not sure I will be awfully keen on large numbers of flats being placed on this site. There's a sort of U-shaped development here, sort of 2 blocks of housing, and then this link running through with a sort of wiggly footpath, or the indicative drawing as a wiggly footpath. So in the heart of the U, there's a big white space, and then there's another big white space on the map as well. Could the officer just remind us what's in those spaces and how open they are to the public? And just a plea, I'm surprised actually colleagues haven't asked for this already. Don't have any photos, do we? It would be quite helpful in some ways to look at the quality of the land and such like, rather than just discuss it in the abstract. So the 2 big white spaces, not the one with the buildings there, but the cursor sort of flicked onto it for a minute. It's sort of in the heart of the U, and then to the north of the road. What are they, and how accessible are they?
My understanding is that neither of them are accessible, if that's correct. Well, maybe you can.
Well, we've got the plan up. The big main white space was a football field or a play area that the school then, Woolstanton Grammar, wanted to extend their sporting facilities. Since they really abandoned it, in the sense that in it's still owned by Staffordshire Education, as they owned majority of the land all over. And that still is there and used, I'm told, by teams. It's rented out to certain teams. They've got a shed on there that they use for changing. One building is Merryfields, which is a fantastic school for children, for disabled children. And the other building is Merryfields. I can't think of the name. It is a nursery for disabled children. Peter Pan, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, Peter Pan. So those developments were put on there on that piece of land. You might say, well, it's open space. Well, it is open space up to a point, but these were important developments that were well needed by residents in the area. I'm rattling on, sorry, I'll just that information. Yeah, leave the information. One's a big football field, and the two, one's a nursery and one's a school. Thank you.
If I may, perhaps the officer will correct me. I mean, if this is a football field, is it the sort of football field that one say finds on the Whammy, whereby Sunday league teams play there, but it's there for, you know, I cycle past the one on the Whammy a lot. It's there for everyone all the rest of the time, or is it in some way enclosed? In other words, is the big white space accessible to public, or is that something that isn't? In other words, the loss of public space we see with the green indicative stuff, which I take it it's the green hatched area with the thing is the development area, not the white area. Is the white area still there for people, or are we talking about complete loss of space? And again, just my plea about photographs. Have we got any photographs of this?
Visited the site. The white area in the middle of the site was fenced off.
No, it's supposed to be fenced off, but it certainly isn't fenced off. It is used by
Yeah, I do, but they're not on the presentation.
James, can we have one meeting at a time?
Sorry, for information, Mr. Chairman, it was fenced off all the way around with the 6-foot fencing, chain link fence all the way around the site with gates on Oon Avenue. But over the years, the fencing have been broken down. Thank you.
Councillor Jones, have you got anything to add on point?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. My understanding is that that land is owned by the Academy School that was formerly Wolstanter Grammar and is therefore private land.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Fear?
Sort of, although I'm a little bit alarmed at the absence of information. I mean, it would be nice to be on the ball. But finally, again, do we have any photographs of this site?
There is some photographs. We have some, but they're not on the presentation. Can't access those then. Can't access those. Well, I haven't heard any sort of firm evidence in terms of either proposal to permit or to refuse, other than the one that Councillor Williams suggested. Just like to ask our officers how that would stack up. Nick, you mentioned the
yes, Chair. Yes, I think members have covered the main issues. I think the starting point is that on the technical elements around the flooding and the highway issues, I don't think that we could substantiate a refusal, because mitigation measures can be put in. We would ensure that it met the current standards, and it will alleviate the issues that are there, bearing in mind that in terms of the flood risk, it's a zone 1, which is the lowest, but notwithstanding that, we've heard that there are localized flooding issues. So we would expect that can be dealt with. So there are the mitigation measures to go alongside that. If I turn members' attention to the appendix, in the report. And this is around the policies that are relevant, the local plan policies. So we have the 2001 saved policies. In terms of the archaeology that was mentioned, it is normal that if there is potential in there, that there is full investigation, and that will be part of a condition. So we feel satisfied that that can be covered off. If members are looking in terms of reasons potentially to refuse it, I'll draw your attention then to the policies in the, which one is it? That one? Yeah. Policies in the top row there, in terms of the spatial strategy. There's a policy there, CSP1, is expressed as design quality, but that does relate to open space. That might be an area that, from what I've heard, members may be concerned about or are concerned about, and that is an area that if you are looking to refuse, then I would draw your attention to that. So just to emphasize in terms of the technical elements, I don't think there is any justification for refusal, but you are taking a subjective view on the open space and the importance of that. So I think that is an area that you can focus on. There is another one there. Which is a policy N16, which relates to the Newcastle-under-Lyme local plan, protection of green heritage network. I've heard that from members, so I think there are two areas there that if you are looking to refuse, then I'll draw your attention to those in particular. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Nick. Councillor Fear, are you happy to proceed in the absence of photographs?
I think that's for colleagues in general to decide, many of whom have a much deeper knowledge of this site than I do. Personally, at the moment, I'm minded to abstain on this because I would like to see that. But I look to my colleagues, many of whom I think do know the site and feel that they can make a decision this evening. I also note that Councillor Holland wished to speak again, Mr. Chairman, if
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, could I express my disappointment that there aren't any photographs available? I know that our guys work very hard, and I know that the planning officer has outlined for us tonight the efforts that went on to investigate the site as part of drawing together the report that's in front of us. I mean, I hesitate to read out the obvious, but on the list of policies that we were looking at a moment ago, our attention was drawn towards CSP1 about design quality. It is right next to CSP4 on natural assets, CSP5 on open space, sport and recreation, which you think might be relevant, although I am not myself moving a motion for refusal. Now, I know that has been done to some degree by Councillor Williams and then seconded by Councillor Jones. It is incumbent on them, and I must take issue with one thing that Councillor Jones says, which is that he believes we need a good reason to permit development on this site. That I'm afraid is not the way the planning law works. That is not the way that town planning operates. The presumption in the national planning framework is in favour of sustainable development. So if we're going to vote it down today, if we're going to refuse this application, we have to come up with reasons for refusal, either to say that this is not sustainable development or that it is contrary to one or more of these policies that's been drawn to our attention. And I have to say that I don't think N16 stacks up, bearing what we've heard from our officers. Protection of that green network as opposed to individual sites is not something that we would necessarily be able to defend at a planning appeal, because the network will be protected. What we've heard in our report and what we've heard from the applicant is that we will have access to the required amount of high quality open green amenity space. And I perfectly understand what various members have said tonight, including you, Chair. There is a distinction to be drawn between public amenity space, which is a defined quantity, and open space, which of course much of it is private and not open to the public, although it may be of great habitat value, although it may be open to the public, although it may be very green to look at. So I'm still waiting to be convinced. I want to hear from members moving refusal some good policy reasons to do so, and then I will reach my judgment. But at the moment, I'm leaning towards permitting the development, knowing as I do the site slightly better than Councillor Fear. Lastly, I would say I'm not sure that I feel comfortable if there are other members who feel they've not seen enough information. I understand this application's been kicking around for a long time and that the statutory target for determining it was in March of last year. But there may well be a case if other members who've not spoken tonight, because we have heard quite a lot from me, apologies for that, if they don't feel that they've seen enough or that they would like to see the photographs, then of course I'd be open to a deferral as well on the basis that we want to see more detailed information. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Members, can you make it brief, please?
I'm still waiting for information regarding why it was refused 4 or 5 years ago and who Mr. Ash is. Thank you.
Yeah, on N16, really, you know, this piece of land is unique in the sense where I've said it isn't cut, and that makes it more attractable for the use it is having by residents of walking, dogs, running. It isn't manicured. As I've said, it's the last piece of ancient farmland as I see within that area. And for the uniqueness, it needs to be kept for the use of residents. And in the last local plan, it was set out. And all through the years as I've been a councillor, we're told when we come into the planning forum or see the officers, it says designated as local access for the use of the residents in that area. The owner of the land, as we said, is Staff County Council. I can understand what they want to do to get rid and excess money. We've done it as a borough on some of the land that we own. But this piece of land is, like I say, is unique. And if developed, you know, we'll lose that uniqueness of the area. And I know very, very well over the many years I've lived there. So you really, on those points, as the officer said, I go for refusal, Mr. Chairman. I could go on and say a lot of things, but like you say, time goes on. But that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
I get your point. Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Moffat, your answer, I hope.
Yes, Chair, in terms of the reference to the previous refusal, just go, excuse me, just going through our records, we can't find a reason for refusal that goes back the 5 years. Now it could be, because I'm not saying that members wrong on this, it could be indexed in a different way. So we'd need to go back to that and look at that. So, you know, these historic records are loaded and sometimes there is a glitch, particularly on a big site like this, that if the site area is slightly different, it may be indexed in a different way. So I apologise for that we haven't got that response for you now. And who Mr. Nash is, I can't answer that.
Thank you for that. From the chair, I'm going to propose that this is deferred so we can obtain the evidence and the information, because I feel this would be unsafe to determine this tonight in the absence of photographs and the reference to the previous refusal. I don't feel that this can proceed. Have I got a supporter for that?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
You, Councillor Fear, that this item is deferred.
I think we have to have a vote, Mr. Chairman, don't we? Right.
That would be a great idea, Councillor Fear. All those in favour?
Retract my reason for refusal then, Mr. Chairman, for the next meeting, or where do I stand in that sense? Thank you.
To move that again, Councillor Williams. Do we have any abstentions? 2 abstentions. 3 abstentions. Gentlemen. Pardon? Application for major development, Madeley Manor Nursing Home. To be found on pages 27 to 42 of your pack.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight we're looking at 2 applications. This relates to a listed building constructed principally in 1820 to 1830. It was used as a care home up until, it was granted planning consent in 1988 for a care home and has been used as such until 2015. Since then, it's been vacated and has fallen into somewhat disrepair. I'm going to go to the slide 7, please, Scott. Next one. We've got 2 applications to consider this evening. The first one is a listed building consent, and the second is a planning application. And what I've done is just put up there the elements that we need to consider under each of the applications. So the first one, the listed building consent, desirability of preserving the building or its setting or any feature of special architectural or historic interest. And on the planning consent, which is more general, and you'll see the 4 bullet points below the first bullet point, and that relates to the principal development in context of the green belt, residential amenity, parking and highway safety, and planning obligations. The top bullet point, this is something that on a planning consent, you still have to consider the impact on the listed building. So, you know, that's very tough. It's quite a tough bar in terms of dealing with applications which relate to listed buildings. In terms of the application, you can go to the slide before, please, Scott, number 6, the one above. That's it. I don't know if you can see that, but essentially this is detailing what we're looking at in terms of what's covered by the applications. So we're looking conversion of the building to 14 dwellings altogether, and this is within the confines of the fabric of the existing building. So they'll be split up into apartments, and parts of the building will be reinstated. And I'm just going to show you a few photos showing the state of the building, principally on the outside, and elements that will be demolished. There's no extensions proposed to the building. There was an earlier scheme, I think last year, submitted for a 52-bed extension. But that was withdrawn because the view was taken that that was probably a step too far. So this application has come in to look at the conversion of the building and reinstate the part of the building, which is the conservatory or orangery, so that it's in better condition and can be used as part of the residential element that's proposed. With the scheme, alterations are proposed to the access and parking arrangements, and there'll be provision of cycle and bin storage, and also provision of parking for the 3 cottages adjacent to the site. If we can just go to the site plan, that's the one there. So we're looking at the area that's outlined in red. I will just draw members' attention to the red line that actually dissects what appears to be the building on the top part of the plan. That building on the left is not part of the development that's proposed. So it's everything within the red line. The next plan just shows the building form. So you'll see the principal building there, which I think is building number 1. And building number 3C, which I'll draw your attention to, is the boiler room or garage that I'll show you a picture of in a minute, which is proposed to be demolished. And the elements 3B and 3A are important because they are parts of the building. That's the orangery, which is actually in a poor condition and does need some urgent attention. Moving to the next slide, this just shows the general layout of the site. So it shows the site in the context of the trees and in the context of the adjacent properties to the south and to the west, and also the green open area surrounding the northern, eastern and southeastern element of the site. I'm just going to flip through a few photographs now just to show the state of the building as it is at the present time. So the first slide is showing from 2 different elevations or 2 different positions, the main building. The next slide, this is towards the back of the building on the right-hand side, where one of the staircases is proposed to be removed. And the building on the left shows the main entrance, the curvature there between the L-shaped part of the building. And on the left-hand side there, you can see some scaffolding which is covering over the existing conservatory. So that's forming at the present time some form of protection. The next slide shows that in a bit more detail on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, that actually shows from inside the current state of it. So it's in pretty poor condition and does need some attention fairly swiftly. Other photographs, just looking from different positions. And then that one there showing go back to that one, showing the condition of the windows, some of them boarded up. That staircase is another one of 2 staircases to be removed. And then the next one, that shows the garage or the boiler house, which is intended to be removed. In terms of the considerations, just dealing with the first application, which is the listed building consent, our Conservation and Heritage Officer has looked at this quite considerably and been involved in the with this site for quite a number of years. And you'll also see in the appendix that Heritage England commented on this. They've made a comment in terms of the betterment of this scheme against the previous one, but they've asked for more details. Since that was first written earlier this year, we have received more detail, and if members have gone into the website and looked at the details, there are quite a number of comprehensive reports which support this application. So heritage statements, planning statements, and it's quite detailed. And actually, if you're interested in historic buildings, then it actually makes a very good read. So I commend members to look at that. The report is also, the application is also supported by a viability assessment, because one of the things that we wanted to consider was, is it viable to do this? Is it just a bit of a red herring? I'll come on to that in just a minute in terms of the planning application, in terms of the affordable housing that ordinarily we would expect to be provided with new residential development. So in terms of the listed building, we feel that this is a positive benefit, that it will save the building, which is at risk. Elements to be demolished, which is the boiler house and the staircases, have no real value, and overall the building will be in a better position as a result of this listed building consent application and the planning application. Turning to the planning application, I mentioned a number of issues to consider. So we go back to the slide with the earlier, please, in the table, please, Scott, which is that one. The listed building element I've covered. The principal development in the green belt. Ordinarily, development would be resisted in a green belt. One of the exceptions to that is where there is an existing building. So this is an existing building, it's not been enlarged. So that actually meets the test of exception. So that members would be safe in approving a development in this development in this location. In terms of the residential amenity, essentially the fabric of the building in terms of its windows are not going to change. It was a care home before, which is a residential use class. In terms of the residential amenity, we don't consider that will be any detriment to the residents of the occupants of the proposed apartments. They will share a very large external amenity area, and we're satisfied that there'll be no detriment to the residential properties adjacent and nearby. In terms of the parking standards and safety, paragraphs 3, 5 onwards in your report actually goes into this in some detail, and there will be a reconfiguration of the parking to a point that 1.5 parking spaces will be provided for each of the proposed residential units. We have looked very carefully at the location of the parking areas in respect to the trees, and we're satisfied that the areas that will change will not have any detrimental impact on the trees. On the basis of the level of parking to be provided, we're satisfied that that is acceptable in this location for this development. The last element there relates to planning obligations. Ordinarily, when we're looking at new residential development, we require a provision of affordable homes. In this case, as it's a listed building, it is imperative, we feel, that there is a life for the building, there is a future for the building. And in view of the cost of the repairs, we have asked for a financial position on this, which we have received, and we have had that assessed, and we're satisfied that there is no, should we say, slack in the development to be able to provide any affordable housing that we'd ordinarily expect. And bearing in mind the previous use, which is still within a residential use class, even though it's a care home, we feel that there is no need for 25% of the units to be affordable homes. So, Chair, that is the summary of the proposal. So just remind you that there are 2 applications here, one for listed building consent and one for planning consent, which will need consideration in their own right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. I believe we've got a speaker in favour of this application. Councillor White. Councillor White, I invite you down to speak, please. Being a past member of the speaking team, just to remind you, you've got 3 minutes to make your point. Start when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Hopefully this application will be fairly simple for you. It is recommended for approval by your officers, as you've heard. I'm here speaking in favour of it. It is an important heritage asset to Madeley. It is a Georgian manor house, which is presented at the top of a hill. It is quite visible within the community, and it has been empty for over 4 years now. As you will have seen from the photographs, it is now in a poor state, and if nothing is done to it quite quickly, it will go onto the at-risk register, which, considering it is a listed building, would be an absolute outcry. So that's all I wanted to say, members. The parish council, the community, your 2 borough councillors for that ward are all in favour of this, and we ask you to pass it, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any members wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is a very significant local building, and I think it's fair to say that it's had quite a troubled history even prior to the 4 years that Councillor White alluded to. I've seen various proposals come forward to take this building forward and preserve it over the years, and I am very inclined at the moment to say that we should be going in this direction. I just want to be very, very clear in my own mind about viability and such like. So the proposal in front of us, as I see it, is basically saying we waive the requirement on affordable homes simply because of the works required on this rather old building, that we simply can't do that, or put it this way, it won't, the maths won't stack up otherwise. And I'd be right in saying, would I, that we're not looking for that provision to be offsite or anything, we're simply waiving that provision altogether. I see our officer nodding. It's with a heavy heart, I think, that I accept that, but I think in these circumstances, and I do know the building reasonably well, I fear if we don't allow this to go forward, we will end up with a pile of stones, and that will be a crying shame. So my personal inclination at the moment, I'll listen to what other colleagues have to say, would be to vote in favour of this recommendation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fear. I to share your sentiment in terms of something must be done with this building. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Fear on the affordable housing. You know, it's sad that we again are missing out on affordable housing, but in this particular case, I think it's warranted. It's and I can go right back when they built the Teachers Training College on the housing estate that's there now, and in 1965, something like that, showing me age. And then the housing estate was built, but this particular building, Madeley Manor, still stands, and it's needed a bit of repair. So I think this will work. But I'd just like to make a point on page 39 on the public right of way. The footpath goes right within yards of the side of the hall, and as the public right of way officer said, that needs to be looked after by the developer. So that point really, we need to just put a rider on that particular right of way that leading from the main road coming across. Lovely spots around the lake, up the field, and then to the side of the hall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'd like to clarify,
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Chair. There is a plan I'm just going to put up, which does actually show, it may not be the specific one that Council are referring to, but they've acknowledged there will be changes to the public rights of way. That is covered by statute, so there will be a specific requirement for that. It doesn't form part of this planning application, but if it's allowed, they can't just move it, they have to go through due process. So it is subject to extensive public consultation.
Thank you.
Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm very minded to support the application. It's a shame, that this building has been let deteriorate in such a way, and one hopes that the work proposed will rescue it. I also note from the report that was circulated that there's an opportunity actually to correct some, shall I say, more recent additions which are sort of out of keeping, and I'm sure that would be appreciated. There's just one point in the conservation officer's comments which I'd like to raise with officers, and that's concerning her concern about lack of storage and the possibility of sheds being erected. I wonder if we could, as one of the conditions, sort of discourage that, because I'm sure that isn't really what we would want to happen. Should the renovation and rescue work take place, I'm sure that would detract really from the appearance of the building.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just checking the conditions. Okay, I think, Chair, if members are in agreement on the basis that there is not a segregation of the site, so you form your own plot, so to speak, that they won't have permitted developments in the normal right that you would see on an estate development. So top of my head, I don't think there are those permitted development rights. But for Belt and Braces, I'm content that if members agree that we'll put a condition on to withdraw any sort of permitted development rights. The fact it's a listed building as well means that some permitted development rights, which would ordinarily benefit a residential property, won't exist, because that's one of the exceptions where it's a listed building. But I think for Belt and Braces, I'm happy to suggest an additional condition. Thank you.
Wishing to speak on this item? Okay. So we've had a proposal that we permit this. I'm happy to sort of make the amendments subject to the conditions that our officer just highlighted in terms of permitted development rights. Are you happy with that, Councillor Fear, to be added to your?
Yes, I am.
Thank you for that, Councillor Fear. And are you happy to second that, Councillor Williams? Okay, on that basis, we've had a proposal and a seconded motion. Would those like to indicate if they're in acceptance of this or not? And that's unanimous for the members that are here. Thank you. So that item is passed. Do we need to go to the second part of the second part of that now, don't I? Yeah. So the application, and that's to permit the work. Do we have a proposer to accept that? Are we happy with that? Or do we need to debate that further? Over to you, councillors.
No, again, I'm more than happy. We need an extra vote, Mr. Chairman, to propose that as well.
Councillor Fear, I'm more than happy to second that from the chair. Would those like to indicate, please, with their hands if they're in support of the motion as is? Thank you. That's unanimous. Brings us on to the next substantive item, and that is item number 6. Application for major development, Park Hill Farm. Members will recall that this has been to committee before recently, and we deferred it for further information. Do we have any more information?
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that this application was deferred at the Planning Committee on the 11th of October. It was development for 64 pitch campsite for tents and camper vans. It was for a period of 4 months throughout any one calendar year. Officers were of the view that due to the 4-month period in any calendar year, and that camper vans and tents would be removed once they've been used, that any visual impact would be temporary. In terms of the rural location in the open countryside, officers were of the view that the development proposed suited such a location. There are trees adjacent to the site, and measures had been put in place to protect those trees. And in terms of the adjacent triple SI, there was a buffer zone proposed of 6 metres, which was advised from Natural England to safeguard any direct or indirect impacts from the development to the triple SI. There was further information requested in terms of highways. and a detailed review of Park Lane has been undertaken by the applicant's transport consultant. This looked at the widths of the relevant sections of Borough Road and Park Lane and provided details of the number and the width of passing bays along the road. The report confirmed that there are 10 bays which exist from the A53 to the entrance at Park Hill Farm. So you can see the A53, Borough Road, through to Park Lane, through to the Park Hill Farm site. It is accepted that the passing bays along to the site vary in quality and size. The applicant has actually proposed an additional 3 passing bays, although the report considers that these are not necessary. They've just been provided to alleviate driver frustration. There is a distance of 1.7 kilometres from the junction of Borough Road and Park Lane. In addition to receiving this additional information, we've had further letters of concerns, and this was identified in the supplementary report, that there were concerns with the highway review that was undertaken. Officers are of the view that the passing places are varying quality and some are less formal than others, but they still enable 2 vehicles to pass each other. And on that basis, the officer recommendation to grant permission, it still remains. And there is a video that has been. Yeah. So I don't know how clear these are. No. Yeah. So there's an existing passing bay. I know the plans are not very clear. There's another passing bay here that exists. There's further passing bays proposed here. These are the proposed. There's another proposal here of a passing bay. The third proposal is here from a further passing bay. And then there's the entrance to the site.
Chair, we're going to show a video now, which takes us from the approaching from the A53. There are a number of key points in the video. Now, if members wish, we can stop at the relevant points, but we'll be here for quite a bit of time looking at that. So can I suggest we just run the video and ask members to particularly look for the width, pay attention to the width of the road, the verges, and potential sort of passing points that are there. It won't show the proposed ones, but it will certainly identify the existing areas. But if members want us to stop at any particular point, we can go back and we can focus on some particular points. But we'll just run through the video, which will last a few minutes. Thank you. Coming off officer was driving at a reasonable speed. It looks like he's going very fast, but he wasn't. To the farm itself now.
Members actually could see that presentation. Right, at this point, I'd like to invite the ward member, Councillor Panther, to speak. Councillor Panther, you've got 3 minutes to make your point. Start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, the last committee meeting, I did state that I had no objection to the proposals submitted by the applicants, and I still don't. My concern then, and it is now, is with the access lane, particularly leading off Borough Road to the farm. The video shown there is not the best quality because of the lighting is restricting some of the view of the roads, particularly the parking places. I did attend, in fact, I don't know if that was done in my car or not, with the case planning officer, Mr. Winnett, looking at the sites there. And I must admit, I was not less than happy, and I still am the same now. The majority of parking places do not seem to be specific parking places. They're not metal surfaces at all, or the majority of them are not. And there's the soft ground is such that even a vehicle of, say, a 6 metre length might have trouble sinking into it if the ground is at all soggy. There have been numerous complaints made to me by the residents of the area about this matter. Particularly one of them, in fact, was a parking place owned a driveway of the local resident, which I think was a little bit well, unbecoming. I don't think the parking places are at all suitable as such. I know they're better than nothing, as some would say, but we're looking at possible safety here as well. Residents have complained about the possibility of accidents and what have you, and I certainly see their points. I would certainly not like to do that even in the dry weather. You don't know just what's going to come around the corner. I believe there are farming tractors and farming vehicles that use the lane regularly, and that causes some concern with residents, I believe, as well. I personally would ask the committee to take into account the poor state of the road and the parking places, the relatively poor quality of the video film there, which doesn't show everything in its true light. And I will leave it there. There are a lot of residents have complained. I share their concerns. I said I've been there and looked at it, and I'm going to ask the committee to take those concerns into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Panther. You may resume your seat, please. I believe we've got somebody who wants to speak objecting to this application. Mrs. McKeever, are you here today? Would you like to come to the front, please? Same protocol exists for yourself there, that you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. Press the button in front of you when you're ready.
We spoke the last time this application was at the committee, and after further legal advice, we've been advised to continue with the process. We currently have an active stage 2 complaint raised about the planning department due to information that has been submitted and told you the last planning committee that was misleading and false. It surprises us that this application is actually being heard tonight, as our outcomes from that complaint are that they would read a statement to tell you that they misled with their information out there, they were false. And our second outcome was that the application was to be looked at in terms of rigor and reliability of the reports that are being provided from outside agencies. We will be pursuing this because of the ongoing misinformation, which in turn doesn't give you the information you need to come up with a trust and valid decision. We actually believe that this application is being rushed through without rigor at all. The misleading of information is still happening. The applicants have paid for a width report, which is what's been referred to. It talks about Borough Road. Borough Road has never been in question. So when the officers have put in that report about 64% is passable, they haven't mentioned anywhere, and there's nowhere in the report about what percentage is passable of Park Lane. Has this been admitted because it doesn't work in the favour? So there's no percentage data for Park Lane. Borough Lane has never been in question. The officers have accepted this report to come to the committee today. It doesn't actually provide the information you last asked for. You requested that each of these passing places, the dimensions and what standing they were required for each one. They've measured the road and they said there were 10 passing places. That was last presented 10 passing places on Park Lane. If you read the report presented, they actually only proposed that there are 4 passing places on Park Lane within the report. The report is very misleading itself. The only report that is available that is unbiased is by the council's highway authority, and they have produced a Form X on the online documents on the 15th of the 8th, and they have refused this application on grounds of highway safety and that it is an unsuitable and unsustainable location. That is the only unbiased report that's been provided to date. So I hope you can see our concerns, and despite the constant misinformation provided and the lack of suitable passing places, we just want you to be able to make an informed judgment. And that's where our point comes, that it's just, it's not the rigor and reliability isn't there. And as our local councillor said, the safety is our main concern, and we share the concerns of the rest of the neighbours. So I'm speaking for the lane. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. McKeever. I believe we now have a public speaker for the proposal, Mr. Miller. Are you with us tonight, Mr. Miller? You'd like to press the button when you're ready. You've done so. Okay, you've got 3 minutes. You'll be reminded after 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Ian Miller from Cameron Rose Associates. I'm an independent and unbiased transport planning and highway engineering consultant appointed to consider the deferred application. Borough Road and Park Lane are very low traffic to country lanes, synonymous with rural life in England and Wales, which is consistent with access roads to many campsites throughout the UK. Due to the low traffic speeds and low traffic flows, the matter for members to consider is not one of operational safety, but simply driver frustration. To clarify, when I refer to carriageway, I speak of the metal surface. When I refer to highway, I'm talking about the extensive adopted public highway, which includes verges, standardised to centre line of the hedgerow or fence line. Please note it's entirely possible for the land within the deeds of frontage properties to form part of the adopted public highway. Our assessment used a standard methodology, which coded the road width at every 10 metres from the A53 junction to the Park Hill Farm access junction. And as already confirmed, 64% of the Borough road facilitates two-way passenger vehicles, with the remaining 36% benefiting from sufficient intervisibility passing points to limit driver delay. In a worst case scenario, the proposed use would attract 64 inbound vehicles in a 1 hour period, with an estimated 40 two-way vehicle movement associated with the frontage properties within the same hour. Members, I note a local resident has commented on our use of the term estimated. I'd like to reassure members that the estimations used are worst case and are termed estimations simply because daily traffic flows fluctuate and therefore cannot be defined as definitive. The probability of two cars meeting each other is 2.09% given the current geometric features of Park Lane. From this, we conclude it's unlikely that vehicles will meet each other in opposing directions. The width schedule presented in Appendix B of Technical Note 1 identifies the 10 existing passing points on Park Lane. Please note these are locations at which we consider offer a place for two vehicles to pass one another. These are not locations that are defined passing places with signage. I believe this is where neighbours' confusion has arisen in the supplementary report. Our assessment identified 7 locations along Park Lane where formal passing places could be installed within our highway.
1 minute.
We have selected 3 of these locations and we consider to be optimal positions to reduce the conflict probability from 2.09% to 0.09%. Contrary to the neighbours' comments in the supplementary report, we can reassure members that no highway engineering reasons, a minor works agreement pursuant to Section 111 of the LGA and Section 130 of the Highways Act that prevent the passing place from being constructed. Indeed, I refer you to application 10-00257 FUL on Hungerford Lane in Madeley, where passing places were secured by committee by these means. Members, whilst the provision of new passing places is not strictly required, their provision will reduce the potential for driver frustration. Accordingly, we recommend that the design drawings are presented in Appendix D, technical notes are secured by condition, and in doing so, I see no substantive reason why this application, campsite application, should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. The officers wish to come back on this, any of the points raised during the speaker.
I don't think so, Chairman. I think just you've heard it from the objector and the applicant's on. Thank you.
Over to you, members.
It's just a clarification question, really. On the map, there was passing points and proposed passing points. What's the difference between the two? Sorry. Thank you.
There were passing places that existed where 2 vehicles could pass, and then the proposed ones that have been proposed by the applicants along Park Lane. Additional to what currently exists for 2 cars to pass by.
Yes, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Jill Williams and myself went down by car, and it is narrow in places. Let's be truthful about it. It's really narrow. My aunt says go with this planning application because it's opened up a little lovely part of the world, not far from North Staffordshire, and I'm sure people will come from far and wide to visit this place. And it's got pathways onto the Burnt Wood, which is the open access land in Loggerheads, with pathways well defined. And it's again, but I just get the highways have refused it on grounds of its narrowness of the road. But could we give permission, temporary permission? That's the office, Mr. Chairman, to see how it pans out. Say for 12 months. Is that a possibility?
The issue with temporary consents in granting a temporary consent, the question is then if it's acceptable for a temporary period, then why isn't it acceptable for a permanent period? And they are inspectors have taken that view that temporary consents are not ideal and that they should be either permanent permissions or refused.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't actually want to speak on passing points or proposed passing points. When the application first came to committee a couple of months ago, I did raise concerns about the possible impact on the SSSI. And in fact, in all fairness, I ought to sort of point out that the reference in the amended application to the buffer zone, and that now being included in part of the plans, I think really does sort of satisfy my concerns. And I noticed that Natural England have also given a similar sort of agreement. So I should say, I think that the concern I had over that was expressed at the last meeting, I think that in all fairness, that's actually been answered.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I spend a significant portion of my time in Pembrokeshire for my sins, and I spend a lot of time driving around areas where there are similar sites, tourism obviously being a large part of the local economy there. And I have to say, watching that video, which I'm grateful to be able to see, I did joke at the time, and actually I am very grateful to have seen that video. And whilst it was on a sunny day, I never want a rainy day, but it would have been good for the footage there. I was able to make out the road as driving along. And I do have to say, in all honesty, that there are a number of roads that I drive on in Pembrokeshire to get to beaches with the family that are much more frightening to drive down than that footage that we witnessed there. I didn't see anything that overly concerned me as somebody who's used similar routes and indeed drives through similar routes on a regular basis between here and parts of Shropshire for work. So I'm inclined to approve this application. I would note that the application states that it would operate for 4 months of the year. So any pressures on the road in that time period would be confined within those 4 months. It's not a 12-month operation, it's a 4-month operation. And I am also inclined, I'm very glad for the public speaker was a supporter who sort of gave us the numbers in terms of their expert analysis of this, and the addition of the passing spaces dramatically reduced the percentage chance for a conflict, I think was the terminology used, whereby two cars will be struggling to pass each other. So I would be inclined to permit this application.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. The members wish to say anything else? Councillor Holland.
Question for our officers. Is it still the opinion of the Highway Authority that the application should be refused on the grounds that it fails to provide a safe and suitable access?
Yes. Yeah, they still maintain. Due to its isolated and unsustainable location.
And Councillor Bryan again.
Thank you, Chair. Could the officers sort of simplify where the difference in opinion would come from the highways and the report that we just heard? What's the fundamental difference of opinion? Where does it come from?
The Highway Authority have just taken the view, given the isolated location and narrowness of the road, that it's not capable of accommodating the intensification in traffic use for a period of 4 months. That's essentially what they've stated, and due to its isolated location in their response.
Are you saying they just haven't looked quite as hard as the other report then?
Chair, I think when you're looking at it from a highway authority perspective, you're looking at it in a singular dimension. You're looking at it purely from obviously that highway perspective. And what they would be doing is saying, well, it's not sustainable because it's in a rural location. Well, yes, it is. And that's what's the attractiveness of this sort of area. That's, you know, these areas are in unsustainable locations. So the view that we've taken is in pure terms, yes, it is in an unsustainable location, but you know, it provides some benefits to tourism, etc. And therefore we've taken that view. So we've taken a more rounded view than we would if we were the highway authority, if that makes sense.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Chris?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of perspective. That's what I'm taking from that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bryan.
Thank you. Just a two-part question, please. The first one is, in the officer's opinion, is it normal for highways authority to take that stance in a campsite, rural type situations? It does seem, in my opinion, unusual to ignore their point of view. And my second question is, if the road deteriorates as they expect it to, whose responsibility is that to then bring it up to standard? Thank you.
Yeah, can do. In terms of the management and maintenance of the road, that would come down to either the local highway authority who would have control over it, or if it was any parts of it were private, then it would be the responsibility of the private owner to manage and maintain that road.
Even though highways have said that it will deteriorate, they would be willing, you think, to bring it back up to standard if or when it does?
Yeah. If they think it deteriorates to a standard that endangers vehicle movements, then they'll have an obligation to address the surface of the road to make sure it's suitable for vehicles to pass. That would be the judgment at the time under the highways legislation, the Highways Act.
And Chair, if I could come in on this, I think we're going to with the county council. They are going to probably use sustainability in a number of their comments. So anything in a rural location, they're probably going to come up with that more and more because of climate change and things of that kind. You know, they're looking at in the realms of highways and travel. So I suspect we will see more and more. Now, I can't specifically answer your question that in that respect, but that I'm surmising that's what they'll probably be doing in future in terms of their comments. So I suspect we'll see more of this in terms of their comments coming from the county. And can I just come back to the road? Part of it is not fully highway. Part of it is the private bit for the farm. So just bearing that in mind as well. Thank you. Yeah. Can you indicate which is the private?
Just asking officers to indicate which part is private and which is highways.
to the site is a private road. If-
No, yeah. Can
yeah.
you show the bit that's the public exit, the public bit? Yeah, you probably need to go into the plan above the photo. The aerial, that's it.
Yeah. That's the private access to the farm. The remainder would be in control of the local highway authority.
Dr. Holland.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a very long meeting. I think we should probably proceed to vote. In the absence of anybody else who wishes to test the hypothesis that this application could be refused, I'd like to move refusal on the grounds that it is an unsustainable form of development, as our officer has said tonight, and on the basis that the Highways Authority has objected to the access as unsafe and unsuitable. Those are the two reasons I would like to move refusal. If that vote is not carried, I can see myself voting in favour of the application just to get it through our books. And in doing so, I would note that this use, the proposed use, is already happening, albeit for a much more limited time. We discussed that at our last meeting. So some of the hypotheticals that have been put to us are already being tested in the real world. Can I move refusal? If I have a second, I will be voting to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. So we have a proposal to refuse. Do we have a seconder for that?
I'll second it, Chair.
Okay, so we've got a proposal for refusal and a seconder for refusal. Can I see those in favour of that or not? Put your hands up, please, if you're in favour. Okay, can I see those against? That clearly carries refusal. Motion fails. So, do we have a proposer, please, that's other than Councillor Holland?
I'm happy to move the recommendation
yes.
as printed on the basis
Yeah,
that I
okay.
moved something that was not sustained.
Okay, no.
That we're for it on the grounds. We're asking
Okay,
farms to be sustainable and put in proposing. We actually went down the lane. I had no problem with it at all of going down the lane, and we did pass traffic, Chair. So I've proposed we go for it.
Much more able to make that proposal than I am, and I'm convinced.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for your proposal. Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, but could we, sorry to add something, there was an option given by the applicant to put in those additional passing points, and I would propose that we allow the application with those additional passing points included.
Councillor Williams, are you happy with that? I believe that's covered in the conditions. So can I have a show of hands, please, in favour of approval? Can I see those against? That clearly carries. The application is permitted. Thank you. That takes us on to item 7. Application for major development land at New Road, Madeley. Found on page 55 to 62 of your report pack. We got a presentation on that. Can we make it brief, please? If it's a presentation.
So can we make it brief?
Yeah.
Chairman, on this one, through you, we got an application to make some modifications to the housing types The report fully explains them. We do have some pictures here and some diagrams if members want to see them. But you have the recommendation there. We feel it's fairly straightforward. This is not unusual to do this as you go through the construction stage. We don't feel there'll be any detriment to other properties or properties within the scheme. So the recommendation to you is to approve the changes.
Thank you for that. I believe we've got a speaker in favour of this recommendation. Councillor White, do you still intend to speak? I guess so. Same conditions as before, Councillor White, 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members, very, very briefly, I'm only speaking on this because I'm here for another application as well. The applicant actually put in a variation prior to this, which was far more onerous and created a lot of issues for local residents. They subsequently listened to those objections and withdrew it. And this was then superseded. So we are comfortable with this. It doesn't cause any issues, and we are happy to basically ask you to recommend it for approval. Thank you.
Councillor White, you may resume your seat, please. Over to members. Councillor Jones.
Move recommendation.
We've got a proposal. A seconder. Can I see you show of hands, please? In favour of. Can I see those against? That clearly carries.
Okay. All right. Next one.
Item 8 on the agenda is application for minor development, the Newcastle Road, Madeley. And on pages 63 to 70 of your report pack. You have a presentation on this one.
Chair, this is an application to modify an access. Permission was granted for a dwelling which has been built. As you can see, it was proposed to have initially proposed a shared access, which was just off here, just further along. Is the location plan. And the applicant has removed the hedgerow and extended the front to make it open so you can get direct access to the property. The highway has objected on inadequate visibility displays, and officers have put forward a recommendation to refuse.
Thank you very much for that. It is, Councillor Williams.
On that road, it's not the road that is made.
We have got Councillor White speaking on this. You're speaking against, aren't you, Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. Quite unusually, members, there is a recommendation to refuse, and I'm actually here to ask you to approve. And the reasons for that is because of the circumstances. And if I put a bit of background to it, when this house was built, it was actually the only access to it was from a shared driveway, which was shown in one of those photos. Maybe your officer would be kind enough to go to that particular photo. That is when you are egressing from it onto that particular road, which is quite a thoroughfare. That is the actual exit. So as you can see, when you're exiting, on the right-hand side, there is a brick wall, which is right the way up to the curtilage with the road. I've come out of that on a number of occasions when I've gone to visit the residents there, and you literally cannot see anything until the whole of your bumper through to your driver's window is out and you're halfway across the road. And the way in which the current resident exits through there is he actually goes to that point, he winds his window down and he waits until he cannot hear the traffic. It is that bad. It is a very dangerous exit. The highways authorities have objected to this, and unfortunately the officer has on this occasion agreed with them that the alternative is actually not meeting the visibility standards. And it isn't, but look at how much better it is to what is currently being used. So what I'm asking you is to look at this from a pure safety point of view, a pragmatism, and to allow the current proposed application to be allowed. Thank you.
Right. I believe we've got another speaker on this item in favour of the application. Is it Mr. Miller? Same conditions as before, Mr. Miller, 3 minutes. You may commence when you're ready.
Thank you. I've already introduced myself. Members, whilst I appreciate you'll already be aware, there are no national or local standards for visibility displays associated with private driveways. Therefore, an application for a private driveway cannot be refused on the grounds set out in the committee report, as visibility displays are derived for highway junctions, not private driveways. Now, the question we need to examine as highway engineers, and the question that has to be satisfied, is simply, would a new driveway at the proposed location result in an increase in road traffic accidents and therefore be deemed operationally unsafe when compared to the existing access egress position? I believe this question is easily answered by photos 3.3 and 3.4 presented in the submitted technical note 1. These images clearly illustrate the proposed driveway visibility is vastly superior to that of the existing driveway. Please note these images were taken 2 meters back from the channel line. In numeric terms, we are comparing an existing to proposed visibility display of 4.7 meters to 9 meters for the leading direction and 4.3 to 7.9 to the non-leading direction, which is over highway land or in the ownership of the applicant. If we compared the effective visibility display of the existing and proposed driveways that we see in the photos, we would be comparing 4.3 meters to 85 meters on the leading direction, 4.7 meters to 100 meters in the non-leading direction. You'll see this, as I say, in the aforementioned photos. This clearly demonstrates that the new driveway is better than the old driveway. Within 100 meters of the proposed access egress, there are 7 houses with the same form of driveway to the proposed, 2 unadopted roads serving a total of 13 houses, 2 access egress points to a public house, and 1 school staff car park with access and egress from Crewe Road, none of which accord with the junction visibility standards. If the LHA were correct, it would stand to reason that there would be a notable accident record for this 100-metre section of Crewe Road. However, the accident records for the most recent 5-year period identify no accidents have occurred. Indeed, the last accident to be recorded on the section of Crewe Road was 18 years ago, and it had nothing to do with the driveways.
1 minute.
As an independent transport planning and highway consultant with over 25 years experience, I have never known a private driveway to be refused because highway junction visibility standards were applied. The driveway can only be refused if members are confident it would have an adverse impact on highway safety, for which all the evidence presented clearly demonstrate it would not. Finally, I'd like to refer members to Plan Application 210088 FUL, the original application for this property, where members approved knowing the driveway visibility display would be 4.7 and 4.3. Tonight, members, you have the opportunity to vastly improve on that previously consented display. Members, as a professional highway engineer, I see no substantive reason why this driveway application should be refused. Thank you.
Over to you, councillors. Councillor Holland.
Question for our officers. We saw an application earlier in which the Highways Authority recommended refusal, and taking a rounded view, we were able to recommend approval in that case. Would our officers care to revise their recommendation in light of what we've heard tonight, or will it be up to a councillor to move some of what has already been said?
Thank you, Chair. I think when you look at the picture there, I think this is a case of common sense versus the technical element. Now, highways in this case have come up with a technical reason, which is why we have gone the recommendation to refuse. The logic may seem to be that this is actually a better solution, notwithstanding that technically it is still inferior. So that's a judgment that members will need to make. And if you do decide you want to take a contra review to officers, could I suggest that we put a condition on that there be no front boundary treatment without the prior consent of the local authority, because what we don't want is the matter to be worse. What I am concerned about, if somebody takes the house on that's got young children in the future and wants some boundary treatment, then we may end up in a situation where actually we do create a problem. So I think we need a degree of control over that for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When the planning application came in for the house, we shoe-owned in, and we had speakers to come before us to say it was shoe-owned in and they were against building the property. But there was no mention that the danger of the then existing entrance, egress, and coming off the sides, not bad going on, but coming off the sides. There's no mention of that at all. The development's gone ahead, they built the building, and we go past it, it's right near enough, not far off the McCrew Road. And now all of a sudden, the old entrance is too dangerous. What games have we been? What games have been played? I won't say anything stronger than that. Really dangerous road, busy road. And it's what do we do? We go with the officer's recommendation. That means go with the highways. But we don't. But you can understand the danger. It's just that point that I feel we've been taken for a ride here from the word go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, Councillor Gorton, and Councillor Fear.
Thank you, Chair. I know I'm a relatively new member of the committee, and I'd come along this evening hoping that an officer or a more experienced member could explain to me how you could have a report which concedes that the visibility arrangements provided or requested are actually better than the existing visibility arrangements, but we're still going to turn it down. I find that very, very hard to understand, and I'm very pleased I don't actually have to explain it to a resident. So if an officer could throw any light on that, I'd much appreciate it.
The simple answer to that is this is done on a scientific formula, if you like. So in assessing a visibility display, proposed visibility, a highway authority will look at the speed of the road, look at obviously the width of the road as well, and they'll have X and Y displays. So X being the distance from the road back to get a vehicle in safely, and then a display into that which gives adequate visibility, taking into account the road conditions. So it's purely scientific in that respect. So what in this case is they're proposing access directly onto it. So the county council have assessed it on that basis. It doesn't meet the criteria, hence their recommendation for refusal. Okay. Hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, it sort of makes sense, but then it doesn't, does it? After all, we've considered a report whereby the Highways Authority said that this was completely out of order, and yet when we took, shall we say, a more holistic view of that thing, our officers came to the conclusion that actually the Highways Authority were wrong in that regard. What I find difficult at this point is that we have a formulaic treatment, and sometimes, in fact, many times formulas are correct, but there's always times when they're not correct. But here, in fact, the officer has not taken a holistic view and has decided to go with the formula. And that seems to me a direct contradiction, which I find rather odd at the end of the day. I also would like an answer to what our public speaker said this evening, which was that as a point of fact, you shouldn't refuse stuff on private land as regards the highway authorities. There seems to be a direct clash there, and I'd be interested to know how that could be resolved. At the end of the day, however, it seems to me that if we're right in saying that at the moment, to gain egress from this place, and I take what Councillor Williams said, but tragically, bygones are unfortunately bygones. We need to resolve the situation as it stands. But if that involves driving half your car onto the carriageway, I am going to move that we accept this application on the grounds of highway safety.
Yeah, we have a proposal by Councillor Jones.
I'll second that proposal.
Can I ask that our officer's very wise suggestion that we include a condition preventing further amendments to that boundary treatment?
Yes, I forgot that, Councillor Holland. I wholeheartedly agree that that is a very wise addition.
We've heard that that's been proposed and seconded. Would members like to show support of that with their hands raised them now, please? And that's no. Those against? One against. Did you get that? Yeah. Okay, it brings us on to item 9, application for minor development, land adjacent to Farcroft Manor Road, Baldwin's Gate. Do we have a presentation?
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a single dwelling. There is some history on this site, and I'll just put the plan up in just a second so that you can get your bearings. There was a previous application on the site which was refused and went to appeal. In terms of its location, what we have here is the site that you can see with the green around it. That is the proposed site. The building to the immediate left, shown as the Laurels, that is an existing dwelling, and the property to the immediate north, to the top of the plan, if Scott moves his cursor, that one there, that is a fairly recent building, which was a replacement dwelling, and I will emphasize a replacement dwelling, so not a new dwelling in the countryside, as we would ordinarily express it. So this is a new proposal, and what's different about this application than the previous application, and by the way, that previous application went to appeal and the appeal was dismissed. What's different about this application is that this has been put forward as a self-build proposal. Now, in terms of national policy, policy has changed, national policy has changed, and we are required to look at provision for self-build plots within the borough. That's something that will come forward in the local plan. That's something we will need to consider. But each local authority for a number of years now have had to set up a register for people interested in self-build plots. So the application has been made on that basis, hoping that members will take a different view to the previous application, and therefore they are hopeful that consent will be granted. That said, and while it is the case that national policy is encouraging self-build plots, they've got to be put in my view, in the right place. This is in an unsustainable location. This was tested at appeal. and the inspector noted the lack of footways, etc. It is in a fairly isolated position. There are a number of properties along this road, scattered along the road, but we feel that in terms of planning policy, this is not the right place for a dwelling, even though it is for a self-build plot. And therefore, we are recommending refusal as we did on the previous application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have a public speaker, Mr. Neil Walker. Are you in the room? Would you like to come to the front, please, and give your 3 minutes? Press the button in front of you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Neil Walker. I'm a member of the Whitmore Parish Council. We are pleased that the officer's report recommends refusal of this application. We urge your committee to vote for refusal. The proposal does not meet the criteria of MPPF Para 80 for the development of isolated new homes in the countryside. 2 previous applications on this site have been dismissed at appeal in 2015 and 2019. Both decisions concluded that the proposal would not represent sustainable development. They both drew attention to the lack of sustainable transport choices, the site's isolated location, its distance from services in Baldwin's Gate, and the lack of safe walking routes. The facts on the grounds have not changed. Further, the proposal development stands in direct conflict with policy HG1 new housing of our neighbourhood plan, which passed review by the Borough Council in Regulation 16 and passed independent examination at Regulation 18. In passing independent examination, the plan and its policies were found to have appropriate regard to national policy. The neighbourhood plan was supported by 82.2% of residents who voted at referendum and was officially adopted by the Borough Council as recently as the 21st of January 2020. Policy HG1 of our neighbourhood plan states that new housing will be supported in sustainable locations and defines what is meant by sustainable location for the purpose of the policy. The officer's report cites arguments from the 2019 Paul Newman New Homes case in the High Court, in which the appellant case was based on the then out-of-date MPPF 2012. But the report does not cite the judge's ruling in that case. The High Court judgment in that case ruled that even a single saved policy from an out-of-date local plan is sufficient to prevent a development. If that policy is relevant and is up to date, and that a policy is up to date if it conforms with national policy. The High Court's judgment was upheld by the Court of Appeal in 2021. According to case law, policy HG1 is both relevant and up to date, and it should be applied to this proposal. We urge your committee to give due recognition to neighbourhood plan policy HG1 and accordingly to cite it as a reason for refusal. Thank you.
I now call upon and invite, on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Copestake. Mr. Copestake, you also have 3 minutes to make your point. You may begin when you're ready.
Planning application seeks permission for the erection of one self-built detached dwelling, which would sit between 2 existing dwellings off Manor Road, located just a 15-minute walk from the centre of Baldwin's Gate. The committee report before you sets out 2 interesting sentences, which I'll read out. The level of demand within Newcastle-under-Lyme substantially exceeds the level of supply identified by the council's self-built register, and as it stands, the demand identified by the self-built register heavily outweighs supply. These are strong statements by your own officer. Demand for this type of house heavily outweighs supply, and that's a local fact. The NPPF states the following. Under sections 2 and 2A of the Self-Build and Custom House Building Act 2015, local authorities must give enough suitable development permissions to meet the identified demand. So in this borough, we have a self-build register showing lots of local need, a lack of supply coming through, and national planning policy informing local authorities that they must meet that need. The application before you will contribute towards that need, a small contribution, but a contribution nonetheless. The applicant undertook pre-application engagement with your officers and received positive feedback. Encouraged by that, they invested in this planning application and were informed only a couple of days prior to the committee report being released that a positive recommendation was likely. That recommendation changed at the last minute, and that perhaps demonstrates how finely balanced the proposal is. Your officers consider that the future occupiers of the self-built house would rely on the private motor vehicle. One might reasonably argue that most housing in rural areas relies on a private motor car to some degree. The NPPF even acknowledges this. If we look at what the inspector stated with regards to the Blackbrook Travellers site appeal in March 2022, it was as follows. Reliance on a private motor vehicle for transport needs is not uncommon in rural areas and is certainly not exclusive to the Gypsy and traveller community. I have no doubt that it would equally apply to the settled community. So some reliance on cars in rural areas equally applies to the settled community. That's common sense. But here there would also be a choice to walk or cycle into Baldwin's Gate. It all comes down to this. Your officers inform you that there is a demand for self-built homes in this borough, but this particular site isn't suitable for such a house because of its location and reliance on the use of the car. There are two opposing tensions. In planning terms, there's a clear benefit in providing this self-built house, and this benefit must be weighed in the balance against any harm created by its location. We say such harm is very limited and is outweighed by the benefit. On that basis, members are asked by the applicant to grant planning permission this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Copestake. Over to members. Councillor Bryan and Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I called the application in due to a number of residents who'd contacted me regarding concerns. At this point, I do wish to state that I do not agree to refusing the application due to the precedents it sets. I think all members of the committee and planning officers will hopefully agree that we make a decision on each application individually, bearing in mind the individual circumstances of the application. In 2019, the planning inspector refused the application due to a number of reasons, which included, and I quote, there would be environmental and social harm arising from the lack of sustainable transport choices available to enable future residents to conveniently access services and facilities. The lack of suitable walking routes to local facilities would not encourage the healthy lifestyles and community building supported by paragraph 91 of the framework. The only change that I'm aware of is that it is now a self-build. Therefore, I believe it to be correct and proper to uphold the planning inspector's thoughts regarding the site and refuse the application. I know the decision opinion would be disappointing for the applicant, but I have to put personal circumstances to one side and remain fine-tuned on the facts. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bryan. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Would the officers possibly be able to comment on the supply and demand of self-build in numbers? So what's the demand and what's the availability?
Yes, I do apologise, Chair. I meant to get the up-to-date figures on that and I failed to do that for this committee. So I don't have that information to hand. But there is, I will confirm there is a demand. And we do have to make provision, but hopefully I've covered that off in my presentation, why we think that this site, I believe this site is not suitable for that. So I think we've acknowledged the issue around the need, and there is a policy requirement to provide for self-build, but this is the wrong site in our view.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Fear.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move refusal as per printed. I'm a little bit surprised by this, really, in a way, because I remember the previous application and I don't see how this new application really addresses any of the things that the inspector said beforehand. There is a demand, that's correct, but I think, as our officer pointed out, that demand is to be answered in the right place. There is a balance of judgment there. My judgment goes with previous planning history. I don't think this is the right place, and therefore I think this application should be refused.
Thank you, Councillor Fear. Councillor Holland.
I'd like to second Councillor Fear's proposal. The refusal as recommended, as it's printed, is good enough in my view to vote for, but I think our officers will come away with the additional sense that we have considered as a committee the matters that were raised by Mr. Copestake. Namely that, yes, this borough does have a responsibility to provide self-build plots, but this application is materially no different from a previous application that was refused, and the harms associated with that and all the reasons that were gone through at the time and at the inspectorate clearly outweigh any policy on which the applicant would seek to hang a change of view on the part of this authority. So I'd second Councillor Fear.
On to any further speakers? In that case, we have a proposal and a seconder to refuse as printed. Can I have a show of hands, please, in support of that or not? There's a refused. Thank you. Takes us on to item number 10, Firebox Cottages, Keele. Do we have an update?
Thank you, Chair. We haven't heard on the appeal to date. So that is the update.
Are members content to leave that on the agenda item in the future? We have a show of hands to that, please. And that's unanimous. Item 11, update on breach of planning obligation entered into an association with the erection of 23 houses at the former site of the Silverdale Station and Goodshed Station Road, Silverdale.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall we actually considered this item under part 2 in private session last time. So we did explain the positions. Just as an update, we have, if members want to go in any more of the detail, we'll probably have to go to part 2 again. But I think for the purpose of the public session, we have had discussions with the County Council, who are party to the 106 agreement. There are 3 elements to the 106 agreement, one relating to education, one to, I think it's highways or travel plan, and the other is green open space, which is a borough function. So we're all concerned in getting this resolved. They're going to join forces with us to pursue this. And we just got some technical details to sort out with the County Council, but we are intending to move forward with this at this point in time. Thank you, Chair.
Are members content to receive this? Can I have a show of hands, please, in favour of? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 12, land at Dodderspool, Betley.
Thank you, Chair. This is the right. Let me just yes. Right. On this one, we've had an officer look at the site. If members may recall that the landscaping wasn't undertaken because it was said the conditions were too dry, the ground too hard. The officer's been down recently, and obviously weather conditions, although wetter, does allow for landscaping to be done this time of year. It hasn't commenced. So what we're going to do is pursue action to ensure that the landscaping is undertaken. So we'll be pursuing that that avenue very shortly, Chair.
Thank you for that. Are members content that we receive that report and it remains live on the agenda item for the future? Yes. Yeah. Could I have a show of hands, please, to receive that? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Item 13, register of locally important buildings and structures in Newcastle-under-Lyme.
Yes, Chair. You have before you, I think, 5 properties that we wish to add to the register. Members may recall that this was set up to look at locally important buildings and structures. So 5 have been identified. If Scott goes to the next slide, there they are. They are listed in your report. So they do meet the scoring criteria. And if you're not familiar with the sites, the next slides will just take each of these pictures in order. So the pigsties, next, that's the Methodist Church and the Pentecostal Church, and also the sign, the beehive sign, and lastly the Newcastle Methodist Church. So we're recommending these be added to the list, and that's a recommendation to you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, you've heard the recommendations of officers in the report laid out in front of you. Do members agree?
I think Councillor Jones is first with his hand up.
It's okay. Councillor Jones, Councillor Fear, then Councillor Gordon.
Just to note that it's quite nice to see the name Gansloyd in the historical places and evidence of Welsh in the area, which I presume is when Wales spread over to this part of England.
Whilst I can't comment on that one, Councillor Jones, I accept your point. Councillor Fear.
There's no nationalism in this point, Mr. Chairman. But what there is a little bit of concern. Just a piece of clarification. I mean, I think these sorts of lists are very, very good. I am right, aren't I? I look to our officers for confirmation that inclusion of these things on a register is not ruling out absolutely development roundabout. I note, for example, the beehive site is adjacent to what I think of as the Zanzibar. I don't know if that shows my age or not, but that's clearly a development site. And I wouldn't want, I mean, it would be preferable for this sign to remain part of the landscape there, but I wouldn't want that to be something which then stopped development that we thought was appropriate on that site.
Chair, for clarification, I can confirm this doesn't give them listed building status. It does give a degree of local protection. So what it's doing is actually emphasising their importance locally, which will be a material consideration in any planning application, but it doesn't preclude any development. Thank you.
I think that's a very important point, Councillor Fear. Councillor Gordon, please.
2 very quick questions, Chair, as time is getting on. First time I've come across the register, I did read the report with interest, also went on the website, but what I couldn't see, and if it was there and I missed it, I do apologise. How often is the register reviewed and how often are nominations invited?
Thank you, Chair. I think the intention is to review it regularly, i.e. every year. At least. So this started a while back, and I think there was we did a review this year, and it's intended to look at that on a more regular basis. What I'll do, I'll get the conservation officer to give you some details around what we've included on the list already, and some of the methodology and a bit more detail, if that's okay with you, through you, Chair, Councillor Gordon, because I think it's very useful for your particular knowledge. Yeah, thank you.
To answer your question, Councillor Gordon. Any other members wishing to speak on this before I see a show of hands to accept this report? Have a show of hands, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us on to item 14 of tonight's agenda. Tree preservation order, Land at Audley pumping station.
Thank you, Chair. This is seeking confirmation to go ahead and confirm the order. The plan here shows a number of trees, significant trees, groups and individual species. So you are aware of what that comprises. The next slide is a list, Chair, which you raised with me. So it's a mixture of lime, ash, cherry, a good mix, and the grouping there at the bottom on the left-hand side, mix of acer, ash, and rowan oak, etc. So in terms of tree preservation orders, we purely look at this from a public amenity perspective. The trees, as you can see, provide a good public amenity. So we've gone through the initial period. There was a concern about the trees being cut, and the landowner said, well, they don't want to cut them anyway, which is great, but they will need maintenance in the future. So, you know, but what this does is give a protection to those trees. So we're commending that you accept the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for the additional information that I asked for in terms of the quality of the trees being proposed in this case. Over to you, members.
And it.
Such enthusiasm. Councillor Jones, thank you very much for your proposal. Councillor Holland, as always, thank you for your seconding of this. Can I have a show of hands, please, in terms of supporting that? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 15. I know of no urgent business tonight. Is there any urgent business? So in that case, just leaves me to say thank you very much for your patience on this journey tonight, and thank you for our esteemed member of the press that drew the unlucky straw in another late one. So thank you for your time tonight. Have a safe journey home, and I'll now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.